Einen schönen guten Abend und willkommen zu einer weiteren Folge von Gabriel Knight. Bevor wir anfangen, muss ich etwas sagen, und zwar ist mir ein kleines Malheur passiert. Letztens ist mir die Grafikkarte, hatte irgendwie einen Fehler oder so und ich musste die ganzen Treiber neu installieren. Und deswegen ist das jetzt die zweite Aufnahme, die ich jetzt mache. Da das Mikrofon auch nicht richtig eingestellt war und man mich kaum gehört hat. Aber jetzt geht alles wieder und ja, da ich es nicht nachsynchronisieren wollte, spielen wir es jetzt einfach nochmal. Also für euch das erste Mal, wahrscheinlich für mich jetzt das zweite Mal, in diesem Let's Play jedenfalls. Gut, wir fangen auch gleich an, dass wir bei Tag 2 sind. Und ja, laut der Assistentin im Voodoo-Museum
I'm going out.
Good luck.
sollte dieser Dr. John jetzt da sein. Und zu dem werden wir jetzt auch gleich gehen und den mal ausfragen. Der wird bestimmt einige interessante Sachen über Voodoo sagen können. Und ja, das werden wir jetzt auch sehen. Da fährt er wieder mit seinem Motorrad. Und das sind wir.
Welcome, my friend.
Hello.
I am the proprietor, Dr. John. If you have any questions, I will be happy to assist.
Great. My name is Knight, and I'll probably take you up on that.
So, da ist er auch schon. Jetzt fangen wir einfach mal an mit ein bisschen Smalltalk. Angeschaut haben wir ja hier schon alles.
This is quite a place you have here.
Thank you, Mr. Knight. I have dedicated myself to the preservation of this unique culture. It is gratifying to see others reap the fruits I have sown.
So where'd you pick up all this stuff?
Oh, here and there. We accept donations of any pertinent items.
Did you ever get any wackos in here?
You mean besides yourself?
Yeah. Besides me.
I do not care to make those kind of judgments, Mr. Knight. All are welcome here.
You're a big guy, aren't you? Do you work out? Play sports?
I do not play basketball, if that is what you want to know.
Who, me? No. You just look like such a natural athlete.
I do find ways of keeping fit, Mr. Knight. After all, our bodies are temples.
You sound like Grace. I should get the two of you together.
Is Grace your wife?
No, she just acts like it.
Ja, da hat er auch nicht ganz so recht mit dem Körper und Tempel. Aber man muss wirklich sagen, er ist wirklich ein ziemlicher Hühner.
So what do you think about summer weather? Have you ever seen it so overcast or so muggy?
It is unpleasant. The heavens are not pleased these days.
Nice outfit.
I prefer simple cotton to dead flesh, Mr. Knight.
I'll have to remember that. So, how is the museum business?
Those who truly seek understanding are few, Mr. Knight. But even one can be an audience.
Yep, sounds about like my shop. So, where'd you pick up all this stuff?
Oh,
Okay, jetzt haben wir dasselbe wieder, was wir sonst hatten. Vorhin hatten. Jetzt fangen wir mal an, richtig zu reden.
Could I ask you some questions?
that is why I am here.
So, wie immer fragen wir ihn über sich selbst aus. Das ist, denke ich, immer ein guter Start, um solche Gespräche zu beginnen.
Tell me about yourself.
Me?
Yes, if you don't mind.
What is it you wish to learn?
Und da fangen wir jetzt auch wieder von oben an und arbeiten uns nach unten.
Why did you open a voodoo museum?
The subject has fascinated me all my life, and I wanted to help preserve the cultural heritage it represents.
What kind of background in voodoo do you have?
Let us say that I cut my teeth on it, Mr. Knight. It is in my blood.
Do you do anything besides run the museum?
No. The museum does not make me a rich man, but my material needs are simple. I prefer to focus on my one true interest in life.
Das heißt, das Voodoo-Museum ist sein Ein und Alles, könnte man so sagen.
What are your own religious beliefs?
My beliefs are too personal and too complex to discuss with a layman, Mr. Knight.
Just tell me anything.
I am originally from the West Indies myself, you know.
Really? What brought you to New Orleans?
I was drawn here for personal reasons.
Just tell me anything.
I am a vegetarian.
Really? I can't imagine living without meat.
That must be the hunter in you, Mr. Knight.
Just tell me anything.
I do not care for small talk, Mr. Knight.
Okay, das waren wohl seine Gespräche, die wir hier haben. Was ganz Interessantes, so abseits, wo wir jetzt gerade mal überreden, hat man die Stimme von ihm erkannt. Das ist nämlich genau der Sprecher, was heißt Sprecher, der Schauspieler, wo auch Worf in Star Trek spielt. Und zwar Michael Dorn. Der spricht jetzt halt hier den Dr. John. Genauso wie Tim Curry, ich hoffe so heißt er, ich glaube so heißt er ja, die Rolle von Gabriel nimmt und Mark Hamill die Rolle von Mosley. Also doch recht prominent besetzt, das Spiel hier. Wollte ich nur mal so am Rande noch erwähnen. Aber jetzt gehen wir weiter mit den Gesprächen.
Actually, I can't think of a thing.
Then, let us discuss something else.
So, jetzt fangen wir erstmal an, warum wir überhaupt da waren. Und zwar über Voodoo, ihn auszufragen.
What can you tell me about voodoo?
Historical voodoo? Or the voodoo currently practiced in the city?
So, jetzt haben wir hier, können wir über Geschichte des Voodoos und Voodoo heute sagen, ihn ausfragen. Wir fangen mit der Geschichte an.
Tell me about historical voodoo.
Very well. I will start at the beginning, Mr. Knight, and will go on from there at your prompting.
Sounds good.
As you may know, Voodoo is a grassroots religion formed by the mixing together of many different African tribal religions and Anglo religions, such as Catholicism or Protestantism. In other words, it is a religion born of the African slave trade, but African slaves were imported not only by the United States, but also into the West Indies where the French and Spanish ran plantation islands. Prior to 1803, the New Orleans area was owned by France. The French Creole in those days owned many African slaves. But the Creole did not permit their slaves to gather, giving no chance for Voodoo to breed here natively.
The Creole also knew enough about the corrupted pagan practices of the West Indies slaves to ban the importing of slaves from that region.
So, weiter geht's.
So, how did voodoo come to New Orleans?
After the Louisiana Purchase, American legislators relaxed regulations. Slaves were permitted to gather. The Americans also removed the ban on West Indies slaves.
Around the same time, a slave revolt occurred in Santo Domingo, what is now Haiti. Between the lifting of the ban and the Haitian revolt, West Indies slaves began pouring into New Orleans.
Some of them were free people of color, freed or escaped slaves. Some came with their white owners who were fleeing from the revolt.
What happened when the West Indies slaves got here?
They brought voodoo with them. The native slaves were more than enthusiastic about embracing it. It gave them power, Mr. Knight, if only in the form of a communal bond. Among the first meeting places were the Bayou Saint John and the shore of Lake Pontchartrain. The early voodoos were heavy snake worshippers, worshipping the one they called the Great Zombie.
Tell me more about historical voodoo.
By 1817, the voodoo activities were beginning to cause fear among the white slaveholders. An ordinance was passed to forbid slave gatherings except in designated public areas at designated times. The time was Sunday afternoons and the place, Congo Square. The slaves and free people of color gathered to dance simulations of their voodoo dances right in sight of Creole society. Of course, they also continued to meet in private for the real thing.
Tell me more about historical voodoo.
There were a variety of kings and queens at first, voodoo priests and priestesses. But from about 1830, a single power emerged. This was a voodoo queen named Marie Laveau. Marie Laveau ruled voodoo in New Orleans for many years.
Von der Marie Laveau haben wir ja schon die Gruft gesehen. Die war ja auf dem Friedhof, da wo diese Symbole drauf gekritzelt waren. Wenn ich mich jetzt nicht irre.
Tell me more about historical voodoo.
I've given you as much detail as I can, Mr. Knight. Look around the museum if you desire more information.
Okay, das war jetzt die Geschichte des Voodoo. Jetzt fragen wir gleich noch nach Voodoo heute, wie es heute aussieht.
Tell me about current voodoo.
Many people think of voodoo in terms of magic spells or grigri. That kind of practice is actually called hoodoo, and is only a part of true voodoo. Voodoo, the religion, has a strong following in New Orleans. In fact, it is growing quite rapidly. There are several voodoo churches or temples in the city, and others all across the United States. African Americans see it as a tradition all their own. Whites, and there are many in their religion, are attracted to it because they think it is exotic. I, personally, am more interested in the history of voodoo. Some of the new movements are copying Haitian or even African voodoo, but it is the voodoo of New Orleans that I find so intriguing.
Tell me more about current voodoo.
There are many voodooians in New Orleans. They often do business selling grigri, telling fortunes, providing luck, and occasionally misfortune. Perhaps you would like to meet a voodooian. We refer those who seek a deeper experience with voodoo to a local practitioner. Magentia will meet him.
Sure, I'd love to meet her.
She lives on the corner of Orleans and Dauphine. I will call her and tell her you might stop by.
Great, thanks.
So, wir haben einen neuen Ort gefunden, den wir besuchen können und wohl auch werden.
Tell me more about current voodoo.
You have tapped my resources. My expertise is really historical. Perhaps Ms. Moonbeam can be of further help.
Okay, das war's. Jetzt fragen wir noch über dieses Voodoo.
What exactly is hoodoo?
Hoodoo refers to magic folk traditions of the South. Hoodoo is a bastard of voodoo. Many of the grigri are similar, but hoodoo does not have the religious aspects of voodoo.
Gibt's sonst noch was darüber zu sagen?
Is there anything else I should know about voodoo?
Not if your interest is primarily in voodoo.
Okay.
Voodoo is of interest to those who study rural folk traditions, but it will not aid you in understanding true voodoo.
Gut, dann fahren wir über die Marie Laveau aus. Da gibt es bestimmt auch einiges Interessantes zu erfahren.
Tell me more about Marie Laveau.
There were actually two Marie Laveaux, mother and daughter. Most people thought they were the same woman. Her continued youth added to the mystique. The original, the mother, was also known as Widow Paris. It was she that began the empire. when the widow Paris began to practice, there were many voodooans in the city. By 1830, she was voodoo queen of all New Orleans.
Eindrucksvoll. Das ist ja ein relativ großes Gebiet.
Tell me more about Marie Laveau.
The widow Paris was a hairdresser for rich Creole ladies. She also paid household servants to spy for her. Between the two, she knew everything about everyone who mattered in New Orleans. She was not above using her information to appear psychic, to intimidate, or even to blackmail.
You sound as though you admire her.
For a black woman in the mid-1800s to gain power is an incredible thing, Mr. Knight. However she achieved it.
Tell me more about Marie Laveau.
She kept a pet snake, danced with it too. She held traditional voodoo ceremonies out by the lake. She took herself seriously, very seriously. But she was not above selling tickets for her events to curiosity seekers. She was not above using voodoo any way she could to make money. That is for certain. But if she had been in another line of work, in another age, that would have been interpreted as entrepreneurial genius rather than a sign of fraudulence.
Hey, you don't need to convince me. I admire anyone that can actually make a living. Tell me more about Marie Laveau.
It was Marie Laveau who defined the voodoo that is truly and uniquely the voodoo of New Orleans. She invented hundreds, if not thousands of spells, potions, charms, and incantations. These form the basis of the modern practice, not to mention the folk tradition of voodoo.
Tell me more about Marie Laveau.
Her daughter, Marie Glapion, took over when the widow Paris got old. Most people thought it was the same Marie Laveau. Both Maries encouraged that point of view. The widow Paris died in 1881. Marie Glapion had been reigning a long time by then. After the death of the widow Paris, other voodoo queens surfaced, and by 1890, the cult was fragmented again. Marie Glapion just sort of faded away.
Tell me more about Marie Laveau.
The Laveau tomb, where one or both of the Maries are believed to be buried, is in St. Louis Cemetery No. 1. It is a popular shrine for practitioners and tourists alike. I myself take tours through the cemetery on a regular basis.
Really? Do you have any running this week?
No, but the cemetery is open to the general public as well.
Genau das, was ich vorhin gesagt habe.
Tell me more about Marie Laveau.
You have heard everything about Marie Laveau that a layman might expect to understand.
Okay. Dann fangen wir mal mit Schlangen an.
Do you know anything about snakes?
Ah, you have perhaps noticed the museum's snake, Mr. Knight. They are beautiful creatures, do you not agree? And the tourists seem to associate them with voodoo.
Is the snake yours? Do you use it in your practice of voodoo?
I admire the spirit of the snake, Mr. Knight, but snakes like the museums can be quite dangerous to handle.
You didn't really answer my question.
I think I did, Mr. Knight.
I'd really like to know more about your snake.
There is really nothing more to say, Mr. Knight.
Okay, das war's wohl. Dann kommt die Johannisnacht.
What can you tell me about St. John's Eve?
It is one of the important ceremonial nights in voodoo.
What else can you tell me about St. John's Eve?
I am afraid I do not know the origins of St. John's Eve. I only know that it was a night of ritual long before Voodoo came to New Orleans.
What else can you tell me about St. John's Eve?
I am afraid I have little else to say about that subject.
Okay, dann fragen wir noch nach diesem Satz.
Do you have any idea what Caprice encore means?
I fear my French is not all it should be, Mr.
Okay. Dann haben wir noch Schattenjäger, aber ich glaube nicht, dass er darüber was sagen kann.
Have you ever heard of a Schattenjäger?
No, I have not.
Okay. Das hat man. Dann haben wir noch New Orleans.
What do you think of New Orleans?
It is the only city in the United States as far as I am concerned.
Scheint so, als ob er diese Stadt ziemlich mag.
What is it about New Orleans that you so admire?
It has a real culture of its own, Mr. Knight, amid the horrid blandness that is Americana. New Orleans alone has a voice.
Spoken like a true New Orleanian. Do you have anything else to say about New Orleans?
I have already given you my opinion, Mr. Knight.
Okay. Letztes Gesprächsthema über die Voodoo-Morde, was er davon hält.
What do you know about the Voodoo-Murders?
The killings in the newspaper? I know that they have nothing to do with true voodoo in New Orleans.
Ob er noch was sagen kann?
What makes you think the Voodoo murders aren't being done by local practitioners?
Voodoo is a popular boogeyman, Mr. Knight, especially in New Orleans. Anyone can pretend to use it, just as anyone can pretend to be a black belt in karate, and for the same reason, to intimidate. I know voodoo in this city, Mr. Knight, and believe me, it is not about killing. Even the police have stated that the killings have nothing to do with local voodoo.
So you know nothing about the Voodoo murders case?
I neither know nor care to know, Mr. Knight. My only possible interest is in how it might affect the public's attitude towards the museum. So far, it has not been an issue. No one has even had the bad taste to bring it up. Until you, that is.
Okay. Wieder einer, der sagt, wie die Polizei, dass das Ganze nichts mit Voodoo zu tun hat. So, dann beenden wir mal das Gespräch. Und danach sind wir jetzt auch genau an der Stelle, wo die erste Aufnahme beendet worden ist. Das heißt, jetzt bin ich an der Stelle, wo ich auch das letzte Mal aufgehört habe. Und damit beende ich jetzt auch diese Aufnahme. Und wir sehen uns dann bei der nächsten. Macht's gut und wir sehen uns. Ciao, ciao.